Howdy again everyone. Today I'm testing out what should be the best of Sony's ultra-wide-angle lenses, the Sony FE 16-35mm f2.8 GM. It's available for $2,100 in the US or about £2,000 in the UK, so this is an incredibly expensive option for Sony users. It had better be spectacular. This lens was kindly lent to me by Al from Adventure Together, who is a fan of this channel. Thanks Al. Check out his YouTube channel in the description below. It has some neat videos about travel photography. A 16-35mm f2.8 lens typically forms part of the quote-unquote holy trinity of professional f2.8 zoom lenses that any full-frame camera system aspires to put to market. It offers you a flexible zoom range from a standard wide angle of 35mm zooming out to a gapingly wide 16mm, useful for landscape photography and wedding photography, shooting indoors and, well, just about anything else in between, architecture photography, even astrophotography, except for telephoto photography, obviously. The maximum aperture of f2.8 makes it easier to work with this lens indoors or in darker conditions too. You can get wider angle lenses than this with even brighter apertures, but this thing's zoom range and flexibility makes it one of the most forgiving and enjoyable ultra-wide zoom lenses you can get. The lens does not have image stabilization, although most Sony cameras have that feature built into them these days. Let's start by looking at the build quality. Like other G Master lenses, this thing is made of heavy-duty plastic, so it feels tough without being too heavy, weighing 680 grams or 1.5 pounds. It's a medium-sized lens, not taking up too much room in your camera bag. Its mount is made of metal and has a thin weather sealing gasket. It features an auto manual focus switch as well as a focus hold button on the side. Then comes a rubberized zoom ring which turns very smoothly and evenly. It'll be perfect for use by video makers. Then towards the front comes a manual focus ring. It's also rubberized, turns smoothly and responds precisely with the lens's focus motor. The lens's autofocus motor works nice and quickly and confidently, even on an older Sony camera body. Another nice thing to see is this lens's 82mm filter thread, allowing you to use all kinds of filters, although I'd avoid stacking them if you want to shoot at the widest angles. It also comes with a plastic lens hood, which is not very deep, as you'd expect, but is nicely flocked on the inside to prevent reflections and has a locking switch. Overall, you couldn't really ask for much more than this in a lens of this kind. Its build quality is pretty much perfect, although some old school shooters might wish there was a bit more metal in its construction. Well, moving on, let's look at image quality. I am testing this lens firstly on a full frame camera, my 42MP Sony a7R II. In-camera corrections are turned on. At the widest angle of 16mm and the brightest aperture of f2.8, we see excellent sharpness and contrast in the middle of the image. Over in the corners, sharpness takes a noticeable hit, but it's still fairly good. f4 looks slightly sharper, and f5.6, f8 and f11 all see minuscule but gradual improvements, leading to excellent image quality in the corners. Stop down as far as f16 and, as you'd expect, we begin to see a little softness again due to diffraction. Let's zoom in a bit to 24mm now. Again, at f2.8 in the middle we see excellent image quality, and the corners, well, still about the same as at 16mm, softer but still good. And once again, stop down to f4, f5.6 and f8 for gradual, minuscule improvements that all lead to excellent image quality across the entire frame. Finally, let's zoom all the way into 35mm. This time at f2.8, image quality in the middle is just good, not as sharp as before. Also, the corner image quality is surprisingly soft. F4 looks a little better in those corners, and the middle looks pretty sharp now. f5.6 looks very good in the middle still, and the corners look pretty nice now. The lens stays this sharp in the corners down to f11. Stop down any further and image quality will soften. Overall, this expensive lens's image quality is certainly quite nice, although it didn't quite meet my high expectations. Its image quality is generally sharp with good contrast, although it needs a little stopping down to see really excellent image quality in those corners. And when you zoom into 35mm, sharpness takes a bit more of a hit. That's not unheard of for this kind of zoom lens though. Let's take a quick look now at how it performs on an APS-C camera. I've mounted it here onto my little Sony a5100 with its 24 megapixel cropped sensor. At 16mm and f2.8 we still see excellent image quality in the image center. Over in the corners the picture quality is softer, but not too bad. Stop down to f4 though for a dramatic improvement there, and at f5.6 it looks perfect. As you'd expect, the lens stays this sharp down to f16, which is dark enough to begin to look a bit softer. Let's zoom in to 24mm. The lens remains very sharp at f2.8 in the middle of the image, although the corners now look pretty weak. They stay this soft down to f5.6, although f8 finally looks sharper. Finally, let's zoom all the way into 35mm. As we noticed on full frame, the lens is softer here in the middle at f2.8, and so are the corners again. However, stop down to f4 for much better sharpness both in the corners and back in the middle. f5.6 looks excellent here, and over in the corners we see improved image quality from stopping down again. f8 looks excellent. So on an APS-C camera, the lens is quite capable of great image quality, but the corners are only sharp when you've stopped down to f5.6 or so, which is not quite what you'd expect when investing this amount of money in a lens like this. Anyway, let's get back to full frame mode and check out the lens's distortion and vignetting. These images are taken without in-camera corrections. At 16mm, we see a fair bit of barrel distortion, and at f2.8, plenty of vignetting, as you'd expect. Stop down to f4 or f5.6 to push that vignetting back into the edges, although it never completely goes away without corrections. Zoom into 19mm and the distortion straightens out as much as you're going to get. At 35mm, we see moderate pincushion distortion, although even at f2.8, vignetting isn't as bad as I was expecting when you're zoomed in. At f4, the corners brighten up nicely, so it's a pretty average performance overall for a zoom lens of this kind here. You should definitely leave in-camera corrections turned on. Now, let's see about close-up image quality. The lens can focus down to about 29 centimeters. When you are zoomed in, that gets you quite close to your subject really. At that close distance, image quality is a bit soft at f2.8. Stop down to f4 though for a huge improvement, so you should really do that when shooting close up. Now, let's see how the lens coped against bright lights. It's a mixed bag here. We see low flaring overall, but when a bright light is close to the center of your image, we get a bright halo effect and some glaring, so keep bright lights away from the center of your picture here. And while we're shooting in the dark, let's take a look at chroma levels, seeing as the lens could potentially be used for astrophotography. I'm pleased to say that, even at f2.8, chroma smearing is actually very low on this lens. Bright points of light don't seem to show almost any smearing at all. When it comes to sun stars though, we don't really see those at all, even if you stop the lens's aperture down to f8. Stop down to f11 though, and a vague sun star can be seen, but it's nothing to write home about. Finally, bokeh. At f2.8, you can get reasonably out of focus backgrounds with this lens, and they look nice and soft, which is lovely. So, that's it. That is one of Sony's best and most expensive ultra-wide-angle zoom lenses. What did you think? I was hoping for more sharpness in the image corners at wider apertures, and the image quality on an APS-C camera left a lot to be desired. Is this a good lens overall? Well, yes, definitely, but is it worth £2,000? Well, not quite, to be honest, but it is a decent enough performer, and if you need this kind of zoom range and this bright of an aperture, it will do for you. Getting excellent image quality alongside a range of 16 to 35mm is a major challenge for a lens designer, which is probably why 14 to 24mm f2.8 lenses tend to be better. Honestly, my own preference would be to get the Sigma 14 to 24mm f2.8 DG/DN Art lens, which costs a lot less money, by the way. Although it doesn't have the same zoom range, its image quality is a lot more impressive, but this Sony lens is nothing to be sniffed at, and apart from anything else, it allows you to use filters, and it has many happy professional owners. Now, I want to tell you a bit of exciting news that I have about my Patreon page. Each month, for my Patreon supporters of just $3 a month or more, I'll be uploading a fun little video of exclusive content as a way to say thank you, and those videos will cover all kinds of things. There'll be behind the scenes videos of how I test camera lenses, the lenses I recommend for various different kinds of photography, and also video location tours of some of my favourite shooting locations, as well as landscape photography tips that are picked up from them. There'll be other videos about unusual shooting experiences I've had, like guerrilla filmmaking in Turkey and my tips for wedding photography. And finally, just for fun, there'll also be some totally random, non-photography related videos about some of the craziest experiences I've had in life, from teaching English in South Korea to trying to manage a 24-hour pizza restaurant, and the craziest experiences I've had taking weddings as a vicar, including the time I had to lead all the music on my guitar in a music group while simultaneously being the official wedding photographer. My wife even suggested a question and answer video for her about what it's like to be married to me and having a camera in your face all the time. And I'm open to suggestions too. What crazy little video would you like to see? Well, these videos will stay exclusive to my Patreon supporters for at least 2 years, and some of them will remain exclusive forever. In fact, there are videos over there right now waiting for you. So, if you found these review videos helpful and you want to help to make them keep on happening, or just to say thank you, as well as catching some fun little side videos, then head on over to Patreon now. There's a link in the description below. I really appreciate the support from you all. It really makes a big difference. Take care now, and God bless.